who's not being featured could mute themselves, that'd be a great thing. Looks like everybody's just about done that already. Uh, so welcome to the Marin Chapter of the United Nations Association. And our subject today is one of the, well, thank you. Uh, what is this called?
No one can hear me because I talk from the side. Sustainable Development Goal.
Mind blank. Sustainable Development Goals. And we're going to be concentrating on number 5, which is titled Gender Equality. And we will be expanding on that notion. I know already that our speaker will be uh, telling us things that are new to us, at least new to me. So I also like to introduce Felicia Chavez, who is the president of our local chapter. And let's see what else we're going to have here. Yeah, I think we're just going to kick it off here. Felicia, if you would like to introduce our speaker.
Yes, I'm actually going to hand it back to you, Skip, to introduce Pri after I do this initial orientation to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. So again, welcome everyone. And for those of you who are not familiar with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 SDGs, although locally we have cooked an 18th, arts, culture, and community. They were published by the United Nations in 2015. They apply to all countries. The Millennium Development Goals were sort of the generation before, and they pertained largely to developing nations. Also, I want to add, I just remembered we should mention that we are recording. So this event will be available to our friends and colleagues after today. So I actually want to give you just a little set of details or data. Let me just check really quickly. Does the speaker view work for everyone? Is that, okay, great. Sometimes people prefer the gallery view and have challenges with the speaker view, but I think that this will work fine. So I'm going to start at the global and move down to the United States and then California, and then just one or two little bits about Marin, and then tie in SDG number 5, gender equality, with number 13, climate action. And I'm just going to take a few moments to do that. So let me bring up my notes. So at the big kind of global level, the World Economic Forum publishes something called the Global Gender Gap Index. It was first introduced in 2006, and it's a framework meant to capture the magnitude of gender-based disparities and to track their progress over time across countries. The index benchmarks national gender gaps on 4 big categories: economic, education, health, and then political, and provides country rankings. So this is a quote from the 2020 Global Gender Gap Report. No country to date has yet achieved full gender parity. All the top 5 countries have closed at least 80% of their gaps, and the best performer, Iceland, which is at the top of the heap for the 11th year in a row, has closed 82% of its gap so far. And then they also note that globally, political empowerment is the largest gap. And this is a quote from the report. Notably, in some countries such as Latvia, Spain, and Thailand, the numbers of women in parliament has increased substantially. Nonetheless, to date, only 25% of these 35,127 global seats are occupied by women, and only 21% of the 3,343 ministers are women. And in some countries, women are not represented at all. And so, drum roll please, the United States ranks at number 53 of the 153 countries. And in the 2020 report, we'd actually gone down 2 points. So to bring it down to the United States, on average, women make 82 cents for every dollar a man earns, according to the American Association of University Women. And I will post in the chat a link to the global index, and then now a link to this American Association of University Women report for those who want to do more research. And let's see, they also say that with regard to COVID, between February and April of 2020, women's unemployment rate rose by 12.8% compared to 9.9% for men. And now I'm going to go from, so we had a little bit of the global picture, a little bit of the national picture, and now to California. The good news is that California has the smallest wage gap, with women earning 89% of what men earn. And let's see. I'm going to cut and paste that link for your future reference in case of interest. And then one more little bit here at the Marin County level. The only sort of, let's say, quick fact I was able to find was courtesy of the YWCA, and they note in their 2019 impact report for their 50+ program that in their later years, women are more than twice as likely to be living in poverty. And so the final bit that I want to cover is relating SDG number 5, gender equality, to SDG number 13, climate action. And I am going to cite a couple of things from, if anyone's familiar with Project Drawdown, they have some solutions listed. They have a categorization ranked of 100 top solutions for reducing climate change, global warming. And one of their main points is education of women and girls yields a myriad of economic and ecological benefits, including having fewer children and greater health for the families, the children who are born. And then I'm going to put a link into the chat to a slightly more nuanced point about women farmers. They call them women smallholders who produce food, but because of their lack of access to inputs like fertilizers and tools, and then credit to buy those things, their ability to produce the same amount of food as men is greatly compromised. So I put that link in the chat as well. And then I am going to briefly share my screen just so you can see our page that is in process. So this is sdgmarin.org, which just in the last few days has been moved to its own independent website. And we have a few sustainable development goals that are clickable and live here. Not all of them. I'm still going to be working on number 5, gender equality, and posting some of these resources I've just mentioned, as well as the recording of today's presentation under number 5, gender equality, when it is a live link. So again, this is sdgmarin.org, and these boxes, number 1, 2, and 3, have little dashes around them, meaning those are live pages. So if you click on it, you can go to it and see the presentation that we had as UNA Marin for that particular SDG, and then down below some resources related to that sustainable development goal. So now I'm going to hand it back to Skip to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia, and I'm happy to introduce our speaker for today. Their name is Pri Bertucci, and I'm just going to read a little bit of the bio here. Pri is a Brazilian social artist, genderqueer, CEO of Diversity BBOX, promoting LGBTQIA plus diversity and gender equality. Pri works with corporations as well as consulting with the United Nations leadership on gender understanding and SDG language. Diversity BBOX is a project of the SX BBOX, a social justice project which operates in San Francisco, Sao Paulo, Berlin, and Barcelona. As founder and president, Pri employs creative skills in multimedia art, somatic approach, and nonviolent communication to work with people and organizations to bring a new way of thinking and being, and to offer social challenges to the world. They work in partnership with the Center for Sex and Culture, which has one of the largest collections of gender and sexuality works in the United States. And just briefly, we are fortunate to live in a part of the world that has been gained, that where much has been gained in terms of women's rights. But where are we really? And what about those who do not fit into the male, female conventional categories? How do we compare to the rest of the world? Is the United Nations itself up to date in regard to gender diversity? Bring your questions. And if you could jot down any question while the talk is going on, we're going to have a question answer session after that. So now we're going to turn it over to Pri. All yours, Pri.
Thank you, Skip. Thank you very much, Felicia and Bonnie, to have me here, and all of you, welcoming all of you for this session. I am going to share my screen with all of you so we can begin. And I'm going to name that this is an invitation to think outside of the box on what gender means. And I guess I'm going to speak a lot of terms and that you might not heard before. And I guess it's very important for you to maybe take a note and bring it up in the question and answers. But the point here is also to bring knowledge for those terminologies. So I'm going to explain them as I use them. Okay. So this is my company, what I do, consulting and training for BBOX. But before we begin this, I want to start doing land acknowledgement. I'm sure all of you around California might be familiar with that. So today I would like to recognize the nations of Shasta, Kono, Mihu, Okawanushu, and New River Shasta. These are the indigenous people who have lived and managed for generations the land where I am today. I recognize these people as the true caregivers of this land in the past, the present, and the future. I like to start with doing land acknowledgement to point out that we are all in occupied land. This land doesn't really belong to us, right? So there was people here before us, and very important to do this. I guess it's a very common way of starting any conversation or session in the Bay Area. People are very, very familiar. So I encourage you to think about what nations were occupying the land where you are today. I think that's a good exercise. So to guide a little bit our conversation, I want to bring those 3 questions for us to think about it. And I guess I'm going to provoke them through the session. It's where we came from, where we are, and where we are going. Without the knowledge where we came from, it's hard to understand where we are and why we are here and where we are going. So I'm going to present myself now. And thank you, Skip, for the presentation, but I'm going to do it in a way that in the Bay Area, like queer people and queer community usually do that. So you start with your name, then you can say all other gender and race presentations. That's very important to say. So identify as a person of color, as a queer, transgender, non-binary person. My preferred gender pronouns are they and them, and he and his. I identify as a non-binary, so that's why we use they and them, yes, in the plural, because it's genderless, okay? And I really encourage all of you to start meetings and exercise, naming the land you are, what's your race, and what's your gender, and what's your gender pronouns. That's a very good exercise to start bringing to circles and conversations, because people usually don't think about those things. To tell a little bit about my story, I spent a lot of my years trying to understand the social norms, because I didn't belong to the box blue or the pink. And here I bring those pictures from this South Korean photographer, and it's called the Pink and Blue Project. It's a very cool photography work where she goes to those kids' houses and find kids who are living like these are their toys and their rooms. And it's very monochromatic. You see very defined ideas that color is also gendered here. A little bit of my story too. I met Noam Chomsky at the MIT in 2008 during the interviews for my second documentary, Conscious of the New Earth. And further,
Hello?
hello?
How are you doing?
Hi, someone close the mic. Thank you. Just want to ask if people they're not been open to ask questions at the moment. They close the mic. It might get me a little distracted. What happened is like understanding and conversation with Noam Chomsky about language. It was very inspiring to me to think language in a different way, like unpacking the words, let's say. So it was a very inspiring conversation, and I followed his work for so many years, and inspired me to think and create a new language. So in Portuguese, for example, in Brazil, where I'm from, we don't have neutral language. Everything is gendered, right? The table is gendered, the car is gendered, everything is gendered, because like in Spanish, right? So that was a big inspiration for us to do that. Then also with the work I did researching the work of Judith Butler. She's a professor in Berkeley, and it's a very cool content of understanding what is queer and understanding language, and help me understanding how to help marginalized groups in Brazil and bring conscious around trauma and systemic oppression. So that was a little bit of what inspired me to create Sexbox, and to work in all these different countries. Has been 10 years. This year we do 10 years, and also San Francisco, Sao Paulo, Berlin, Barcelona, but also we did Paris 2 years ago, Bogota, and Osaka in Japan. So there's a little bit of all the companies I have been consulting with. There's a few more that are not there, but we've been teaching all of this content for a lot of different companies. But most of all, I guess, one of the most important clients was when we start working with the UN. So we launched how the UN is going to apply all this content on LGBTI inclusion in Brazil through a lot of events we hold there. So I'm going to just share a few slides with you. I can send that to you. You can see in the website later how those LGBT inclusions UN works. But I think the most important, it's bringing the 4 sustainable development goals that we have been achieving as working with this. So number 5, gender equality, number 8, number 10, and number 16. And of course, today the topic is gender equality. And I start provoking the UN Brazil to think beyond what gender means in this SDG, right? Because when you think about gender, usually people think about women, only women. they don't include men or trans people or non-binary people. So we developed in the beginning of this year in January, content with UN Brazil to update, right, the number 5, because it's missing a few things. And that's what I'm gonna bring, is this new possibility that UN can bring to us, understanding gender much better. And for that, I'm going to invite you for a brief dialogue in the many ways to exist in this world. I see my slides are changing a little slower. Okay, yeah. I really like this phrase. It's from the movie The Turning Point from Fisher Capra. And what they say in the movie, it is very moving, was, it's foolish for a society to cling on old ideas in new times, as it's foolish for a man to try to wear his clothes from when he was a child. And I feel like understanding what gender is and trying to say that only women has gender, it's a little bit of trying to use the old clothes that doesn't fit us anymore. We are growing up now, so we need to update our language. We need to update our ideas about what gender is. So all this conversation about gender equality, LGBT, whiteness, race, right? It's very current. Everybody's talking about this lately, right? We see what's going on, everything that happened with George Floyd, and now all the bills that we had around stopping transgender people to have their rights. So we're realizing, right, together, how much we live in a sexist, racist society that makes life of both personal and professional for women, LGBT, and Black people very, very difficult. And this is what I teach pretty much every day. That's the topic I bring up. So we need to talk about the toxic masculinity idea, the LGBT phobia, the whiteness, and try to bring more focus and closer to look at this unequal conditions that we are living in. Okay, so the point is that talking about these conversations are gonna be discomfort. They're gonna bring discomfort. And I guess my invitation for all of you is to sit with the uncomfortable that you're feeling, if you are feeling, or anytime someone would bring up gender conversations or race conversations, because if you sit down in that uncomfortable, right, that's where the change is going to happen. Because if you're avoiding, right, the discomfort, we're not going to change anything, right? There's no change without discomfort at this point. So for a long, long time, the story that we saw was this one. Do you understand what we see here? We see a white couple, and they are heterosexual and cisgender. We're going to talk about what cisgender is in a minute. They're skinny, right? And they are beautiful and rich. So this idea of happiness and has built up in our imagination since we were little kids, right? If you look at all the movies, all the cartoons, all the books, everything that we are told was built upon those ideas of this is normal, right? People would look at this, oh, this is normal. And what happened is that anything that doesn't fit this image become unnormal and become some kind of aberration in our society. The problem is we inherit the social norms about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman in society. we stop questioning this, right? But I'm very excited that I'm living in this time where all these conversations are put on the table so we can look and unpack and understand what it is. Because there's so many other stories. There's so many other stories. And just to bring a feel here, if you haven't seen, for example, Pose, the series on Netflix, I really recommend it. That's like a lot of learning just by watching the series Pose at Netflix. And I also recommend, I guess 2 weeks ago, Ella Page, who used to be Ellen Page, has recorded an interview with Oprah, and it's very, very powerful. So I recommend that as some resources that you can watch later and understand what I'm talking about more deeply, because that's the conversation that's going on today. It's a very good interview. So how can we change the current landscape, right? How can it change our ideas? And then I'm gonna bring you for a turnaround here in the conversation. Science calculates that in our planet has around 30 million species, but we only classified around 3 million of them. And one of them is the Homo sapiens. There's all the other diversity and biology in this planet. And we are around 7.3 million people in this planet. 7.3 million of possibilities, of ways, of bodies, of ideas, experiences, identities, stories, desire, and dreams. My question to you is, how can we find a consent or an idea what is normal and what's not normal for 7.3 billion people? It's impossible, because what's normal in one culture, it's not normal in another one. I'm going to give an example. For men who are born in India, it's okay to walking giving hands and they kiss each other in the face all the time. It's a natural thing. No one is gonna go crazy if you see two men walking the street holding hands. Well, in the US, it's a different thing. But I'm gonna tell you a story about Brazil. It's very, actually Brazil and South America as a whole, right? The idea of the masculinity, it's so deep and actually so fragile that anyone who runs against the norms are gonna suffer. So a few years ago, there was a daddy and a son. He has probably 20 something years old, and they're walking in the streets giving hands. And because of that, they were attacked by a group of men who ended up hurting them physically and cutting the dad's ear off. That was in all the newspapers around Brazil, because a dad and a son could not walk giving hands in the street because that's unnormal for the norm of the masculinity. You see what I'm saying? How dangerous it is, those ideas that we carry on, and normality, we create a lot of violence. So that's what I want to talk to you about it, to deconstruct the idea of normality. That's what we need to do right now, to understand where we came from, where we are, and where we're going. So that's a very important image I want to share with you for you to reflect on. All our culture, our economy, the politics, education, and the justice system is built upon the idea of whiteness and cis heteropatriarchy. Whiteness and cis heteropatriarchy are the lens. Let's say if it was glasses that you wear, that's how we build the system, from those lens, from those people. And that's called colonialism, right? So a bunch of white people came here decimate all the indigenous people, and erase the story about trans people who are here in the land, for example. And then we create all these other problems, right? We create toxic masculinity, we create misogyny, we create racism, ableism, LGBT phobia, heteronormativity, elitism, classism, and that's the problem, because women has no voice here. If you go back in the day, we know we didn't start voting into, I don't know, the 1800s, having rights, right? Like, we didn't have space for women in society the way man has. And I think that's one of the characteristics, because what being said today is that if women were there from the beginning, probably this were not going to be the way it is today. Also, people of color is not part of the decision make that build all the ideas of countries and states, much less transgender people. We are not part of this discussion. We're not part of the decision making. So everything was created on top of this idea. And yes, we exist. So this is a resource I can actually send the link to Felicia. Maybe she's going to share later with you some resources from Alt and Equal and Diversity Box. This is one of the resources we have done together for help educating people around transgender identities. Indigenous and two-spirit people have existed in the land much before colonialism. Yet all of our informations, our history were erased. We have very little was left today, especially when you look at South America, Latin America as a whole, the pre-Columbian history, everything was destroyed with our bodies and our existence. That's why it's so interesting, because people say, well, now there's a lot of trans people in the world, there's non-binary people today, as if it was a new thing. It's not a new thing, it has been there forever, but you didn't know that before because you only see the society with the lens, with the glasses, right, of whiteness and cis heteropatriarchy. So this is the big conversation that we're having here. This is the big conversation we're having with the UN right now. Actually, we're going to present some of the new researches and the proposals for UN for the World Forum in Copenhagen in August, actually, this August. And I'm part of the committee who is looking at this and trying to change those lenses, right? We need to see the world from a more diverse and broader view, right? So one way of doing this and learning all of this, it's called inclusive communication. This is a very big topic in Brazil right now. And I hope in US it would also be a meaningful thing. But we bring all of those other aspects of what was off the table and put back on the table in the communication. So inclusive communication is the umbrella term that recognizes the use of communication resources different from the norm, right? Which is recognize the symbolic advantage and privilege that structure our communications. It is born from a recognition of false idea of moral and intellectual superiority of a social group. Inclusive communication takes into account the inclusion of marginalized groups in language, like LGBTQIP+, women, Black people, and people with disability. Here, I would say people of color in general. Neutral language and inclusive language are part of this umbrella. So that's why I would say I identify as they and them, right? Not using gender to mark anything. That's more neutral language and inclusive language. And that's more a pressure to make people think that our communication is also connected with those ideas, right? Of a privileged group only. And to make us go even beyond that, I'm gonna share with you this quote from Grada Quilomba. She is Black woman from Portugal. And she has this quote that we can use for racism, but we can use for gender, we can use for a lot of other things, especially LGBT too. So what she says is this: racism is a social historical trauma whose coping process goes through a phase of denial, guilt, shame, recognition, and reparation. What's happening is that if you put the gender there, right, we can also see that the same process is going on. The denial of man, for example, right? The denial of cisgender people, of transgender people, right? A lot of people don't want to look at it. And sometimes when they take the courage or the intelligent emotion, right? Emotional intelligence to look at it, some shame and guilt will arise. And I invite you, if you feel that process, and if you know anyone who is going through that process, would feel shame and guilt, to sit with your shame and guilt, because those are very important part of the process that we cannot bypass to understand what's going on. And then we are going to be able to do the recognition, but we can bypass the process. And after recognition, we can do reparation. That's like, how can we fix this? How can we look at this and make action, right? So I really like this quote. And there's a lot of books that she wrote, and I really recommend you might look in Amazon. That's brilliant content about gender and racism that she brings. I'm going to give an example, very practical example, and how this operates in our system today. Who sees the face doesn't see the talent. Organizations are still composed of and led by a very specific slice of the population. From the top 500 companies in the world, from the total of 500 CEOs, we only have 24 women. This means 476 men. 3 of those men are Black. 1 of them is openly gay. This means 472 white cisgender heterosexual men. 94% of the CEOs of the companies are white cisgender heterosexual men. And what's the problem with this? That we only see in society, companies, organizations with one lens. Who the leadership, it's only the same. So without diversity there, without having more women, more trans people, and LGBT people, and Black people, people of color, indigenous, and all the other diversity possibilities of humanity, we are stuck with the problem. So my conversation with the UN right now, it's looking at, without changing the leadership of those big corporations, we're not going to change the whole picture. We're not going to change how we're going to evolve in society. Some of them are willing to change, and the ones who are changing, very cool, is that they understanding that if they don't understand diversity right now, they are going to miss the point. And this is going to touch in the commercial version of reality, and that what it means to them, right? So, for example, this article from BCG is telling us that the majority of people in 5 years are going to be Gen Z, are going to be millennials, and are going to be LGBTQI people. So 70% of the workforce in 5 years are going to be this people, us, right? What the companies are going to do, they don't have a queer safe environment to have these people to work there. They don't even know how to treat people. They don't even have restrooms for us to use as trans people in their companies. So it's a backlash that's happening right now, and all the companies are waking up and rushing to change their culture to adapt for the new workforce that's coming. And guess what? those people are the best talents, and they're not gonna, if you don't have those policies in place, they're not gonna work for your corporation. They're gonna work for your competitor. So it's interesting what's going on, to say it least. That's a very point of transformation. So just checking with Felicia, how much time I still have, please?
Yeah, you have about 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. So let's go deep into what gender is. Now I'm gonna share you a little map, right? Maybe some of you never look at this before, but I like to say that the big transformation of paradigm that we're going through right now, it's learning to separate gender that's in our heads from our bodies, with the body we're born with. So let's look at this for you to understand what is cisgender, as I mentioned before, and what is transgender. So someone who was born with the body of a male, meaning born with a penis, it's recognized itself as a man, you are cisgender. If someone is born with a vagina and recognized as a woman, you are a cisgender woman. So most of you are here probably are cisgender. Now, I put there intersex as well, because very little people know what intersex is. We are, back in the day, we called intersex people as hermaphrodites, but that's not a good way of talking about intersex people. What is that? Is that people were born with bodies who are not the medical, right? The society, it's not prepared to deal with those bodies. It's 42 different kinds of intersex people that exist in the world today. And because they don't know what to do with, sometimes they do surgeries to try to fit those people in one or the other category, right? Remember the two boxes I showed, the pink one and the blue one? It's like society has divided itself in two, right? And this polarity, right? And the polarity that we see also with black and white, men and women, life, right and left, this is all a part of the problem. So it's so interesting to see that biology has created people with bodies who are diverse. We have diverse biology. This is not aberration. This is how people were born. So if someone is born intersex, they can also be a cis man or a cis woman. It depends how they are gonna live their lives and whatever kind of surgery was forced on them when they were a kid. Now let's look at transgender. Oh, important to say, cisgender as a prefix, you know, it means on the same side, on this side of. Example, cisplatin, cisandine, and this is our names that we are using to put the cis as the separation of not separation, let's say the prefix, right? Like what comes before for you to understand the language. And I'm sorry about my English, maybe I'm not using the exactly words I want to express myself. While trans people, the prefix means movement beyond, movement through. Example, transatlantic, transamazonic, Transylvania. So cisgender people did not cross the gender, while transgender people cross gender. So that's a way that we can try to understand the difference. So what is a transgender person? Someone who are born with a penis and identify as a trans woman is a trans person, identifies as a woman. Someone who was born with a vagina and identify as man, that's trans. Or someone who's born with a vagina and identifies non-binary, that's my case. So all of those are the trans identities. And this is a very important point to put out there, because people usually don't heard about non-binary, and it's confusing, right? Because it doesn't mean that you need to have a different kind of body to be non-binary. And this is what I want you to look at it as the image of crossing, right, gender and being in the same that you assign as birth, right? Someone look at your body and said, oh, you have a vagina, you're a woman. And you said, okay, great, you live your life, you're fine. But someone said that to another person that said, I don't identify as women. I identify as man or identify as non-binary. So to separate gender and body, that's the main work that we need to do. So I'm gonna go beyond and share some more. We need to talk about us. We need to talk about our bodies, our identities, our expression, and our affections. And then to understand all of this, we need to separate in those four different parts, right? So first you have the body that you're born with and the genitals you have. Gender identity is your motherboard, it's your head. It's like, how do I identify with myself? How do I feel comfortable with myself? Gender role and gender expression are different things. Gender role is what society expects you to perform in your day-to-day life. And gender expression, it's what things are going to use to express that gender. So for example, wearing makeup, might be considered something that is feminine, while using a tie and having a beard might be considered something that's masculine. So all of those things are not gender identity, they are gender roles and gender expressions. And then we need to talk about our sex orientation. That's why I put a heart over there, right? Because that's where your desire goes to. So who you like. So those are four different things. If I identify as women and I like women, I'm a lesbian. Understand? I am also cisgender if I identify with the gender assigned as birth. So just giving a few examples, and we can have more conversations about this and ask questions. But basically, it's not like those outlets, like I'm sharing the image right there. So like those plugs that it's like perfect, you need to connect with a specific way, right? Like if you're born with a penis, you need to identify as man, and you need to be strong, and you need to wear blue, and you need to like women. So none of this are the way people live. There's a lot of people, there's 7.2 billion people in the world that are, a lot of people don't identify with this idea. And the thing is, we can use those four things. They don't need to follow the same rule that we before believed was natural or normal. So that's why the idea of normality needs to be thrown out of the way. Okay, let's look at the acronym now. LGBTQIA+. You're gonna say, oh my God, how many letters now, right? We only have LGBT and that was fine. Maybe LGBTQ, maybe LGBTQI, but now we have A and plus. What I mean, a lot of people ask me that every day. A lot of people are like, oh my God, many letters. And I like to say this: what doesn't have a name, it doesn't exist. If you don't name things in your reality, it doesn't exist in your reality because it doesn't exist in your perception if you don't understand the meaning behind. So that's very important for us to look at it. So that's why we have this, let's say the most used in the world right now is the acronym LGBTQIA+. Actually, New York in 2019, we're celebrating the 50 years of Stonewall, and they use this as the official, acronym for the community. So L, lesbians; G, gays; B, bisexual; C, transgender; Q, queer; I, intersex; A, asexual; and plus other orientations and identities not yet claimed. So there's more to come, probably. I explain a little bit of some of them. You can ask me questions if you have any, questions about all the other identities. We can. That's a big course, right? I explain all of this in much more details in like 4 hours, and you're welcome to hire me to give that class as well. But let's look at the acronym. The only letter that represent the body and our genitals are the I. That means intersex people. And when you look at the bodies, what bodies it is? When you say bodies, I mean, we used to say sex, and I'm going to put a quote unquote because sex and gender are, people think they're the same thing. I was watching a movie yesterday and someone said gender, and the subtitles were saying sex, and I was like, oh my God, we are so lost in translation, because that's the problem. Gender and sex are different things. So when I say body and genitals, I'm forcing you to stop using sex as a word, or even biological sex as a word, and starting using body or genitals, because that's what you're talking about. The bodies are classified in male, female, and intersex. This is the kind of bodies we have so far today in humankind. So, for example, if you look at your ID, what is saying there? It's saying sex, and it's saying what? Male, female, right? Some people has the ability right now, if you fight, you can have your intersex, there as well. But we lost in translation. In each country that exists, it uses a different definition for this, and that's the problem. In Portuguese, for example, we ask, what's your sex? So what's your body? And we respond, my gender expression is female or male. So it's not female or male. They will say masculine and feminine. They respond with a different thing. So another term I said, biological sex, not very cool to use, because when you have a trans woman try to use a restroom, and you have a cisgender woman who think, because she's a biological woman, right? Look at the idea. No one is biological woman. Such a thing doesn't exist, right? But they say, I'm a biological woman. I have more right to be here than you. So that's where things start getting very complicated, because there's not such a thing. So that word is called weaponized. So people don't use biological sex anymore. So this is a very new update. So it's probably not yet in the mainstream. Let's look at gender identity.
Just wanted to give you the 5-minute flag, Pri.
Okay, thank you. Let's look at gender identity. So we have the T as transgender and the Q as queer. And when you talk about gender identity, then we talk about women, non-binary, and man, right? How do I identify with myself? Let's look at the idea of man, women. Oh, sorry, let me do something here that's not supposed to be here. It's not by gender. Here. Looking at gender, this is how it looks. It's not like binary is in the middle. So we have men, women, and we have non-binary somewhere there in the intersectionality of those, right? Some non-binary people can have aspects of men and women. Let's look at gender role and gender expression. As I said, right? This is everybody perform gender in one way or the other. So that's gender expression and gender, gender expression is like the way I want people to see me. And then we can use feminine, androgyny, and masculine, right? Different than men and women, and different than male and female. So that's the main important message here. We need to separate feminine from women, from female, and we need to separate masculine from man and male. Those are 3 different things. And unfortunately, in all literature and TV shows and magazines, they are messing up all those terms. Let's look at sex orientation. Then the letters are going to be LGBTQA. And then you can have homosexuality here and heterosexual here. And in the middle, you can have pansexual, bisexual. That means people who likes everybody, but it's not in the binary again, right? So that's a little bit of sex orientation to clarify. I invite you to be part of this conscious, engaging in this program we have with Alt and Equal, that inviting people to use the gender pronouns in their social media. So a lot of people now in LinkedIn are using their gender pronouns after their names. And I actually spoke with LinkedIn 2 days ago, and they said they are launching here in the US right now in June, a new form where people can actually put their gender identity there. And then they're gonna launch in Brazil in the following months. And I was super excited because somehow both of us as Alt and Equal and Diversity Box, we push the agenda for people to use that. You can ask me why, because if you normalize gender identity, you normalize for everyone, right? So if you share your gender, you're gonna help a lot of other people like me to share gender and not feel, like that I'm bothering someone to say, actually, I'm not a she, I'm a they, right? So you help to naturalize, let's say, that idea, okay? So if you're interested in Diversity Box or knowing more, we have our website here and a little bit of our story, and also my email address. I'm gonna leave this screen here if you wanna take note and send me a message or have any further questions. I guess that's it for now. I'm totally open for questions and let me know. I probably said a bunch of things and you all have questions. Let's see how that lands.
Great, thank you very much, Pri. So this is where we ask everyone if you're willing to unmute and we applause for our speaker.
Yay! Thank you, Pri.
Very good.
Great. So I think, Skip, were you going to MC the Q&A?
I certainly can if you wish.
Either way is fine with me. I guess I'm forgetting what we'd worked out ahead of time.
It's easy to do, but I'm happy to do it. Okay, anybody? Okay, here's Kay Noguchi, and Elizabeth's next.
Pri, I wonder if you could just explain the distinction between gay and queer.
That's a great question. Yeah. So what happened is that also different countries understand queer in different ways, right? So in US, back in the day, queer was a way, like a derogatory way to talk about LGBTQ people, right? So we reclaim that word as like, yes, we are queer. Like we are not straight, we are queer. So queer today in US, and let's say in the Bay Area, it's used as a big umbrella that everybody who is not hetero or cisgender can put themselves in. It's like a big umbrella. So some people can be a gay man and they say they're queer. Some people can be trans and they say they're queer. Some people can be lesbian, they say they're queer, because here in the Bay Area, I mean, in the US, you have a more broad spectrum of queer being everything that's opposed to cis heteropatriarchy. That's one way. The other way is like, if someone say they're gender queer, that's something else, that's the identity. So that means they are non-binary. That means they don't identify as men or women. So queer has a lot of definitions. It's a verb, it's substantive, is an identity, is a sex orientation. A lot of people use these terms in different ways, and it can be a long process. I usually take at least 4 hours to go deep in those and explain all the possibilities. But basically, if someone say they are queer, they're saying they're not straight or they're not, you know, in the cis heteropatriarchy somehow. Yeah, yeah, it helped you. Cool. Thank you for the question.
Elizabeth, you had a question?
I had the same question, so that answered it.
Okay, who else wants to chime in here for
I
free?
have a question.
Paul.
Hi, thank you very much for that presentation. I really got a lot out of it. I have some nieces and nephews in the late teens, early 20s, and they're really seized with the issue of trans and the challenges they face. And it's really at the forefront of their thinking and their social activism. And I'm wondering two things. What is it do you think that makes that so important to them in a generic sense for that age group, the young folk who are seeing this as their challenge they have to face? And then of course the difference with the generationally, because we've had conversations in the family where some members of our generation have not been as sympathetic as they might be, and not hostile, but just not getting it. So what is the way to think about how the young folks are grabbing hold of this, and how do we bring people together who want to be brought together, who are sympathetic with each other and otherwise can communicate, but have a little trouble understanding how to bridge the divide? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody's seeing like, oh, there's people like young kids and, you know, like all the millennials, not all the millennials, but like a lot of them are already like came with this idea, but like definitely the Gen Z. Now it's coming, it feels like it's a different motherboard, or it's a different set of, you know, parts that these kids are born with. And when you talk about collective consciousness, I believe that they are being born in a container who have already explode and share and talk about it, all of this in a way that it's so easy to tap into that idea that something else exists between the man and woman, the male and the female, all of these things that we believe was the norm or is the only way of existence. And I would say internet has helped us tremendously, right? Like there's so much content. And I would say, again, the interview with Oprah and Elliot, it's so good and so deep because for so many years, I mean, in my generation, right? I'm 42 years old. I have to suffer so much to be able to say first I was a lesbian. And then after then defining I was a lesbian, I actually, you know, only when I moved to the Bay Area, I was 20, I don't know, 20 something when I moved to the Bay Area. And I said, oh my God, I don't think I'm a lesbian. I think I'm trans. And when I'm, you know, it's just like, I didn't have even access of the information and I have no reference, no one I could look up online or a YouTuber that would tell me that my existence is okay and I can be who I am. Instead of in the past, people are murdered, people were, you know, lose so much. I mean, today is still happening, but it's much better and it's gonna be better because there's a campaign who said it's get better because there's no going back. We just understanding that body and gender are separate things, and those kids are really, everybody in the end just want to be loved and accept, and they are seeing that for being the potential that they can be in this world today, they need to be themselves. And for being myself, I have to break with all those false ideas and norms that cis heteropatriarchy and whiteness has put upon me, right? So that's a realization. And I don't know if my partner in Sexbox, Claire, work a lot with those concepts too. If she want to share something to Claire, feel free to bring it up. But I think those ideas that we see now, it's not a new thing. And it's actually available, that it's not new. And when you realize that trans people and queer people have exist all over the world and from through history. And we don't only know them because they're not in the mainstream. We don't know that they exist because, again, the lens we see society was only one. So yeah, I don't know if I answer your question, but also if you want to open the mic and share other things, please, everybody, feel free to share ideas too and perceptions.
So one question or comment that I would have is that I think trans, there's a real big continuum there. And, you know, in the old days, we talked about people that were cross-dressers. That's, you know, maybe a very early expression of a trans identity. But I mean, it's an entire continuum where gender affirming surgery is kind of the extreme of that experience. Would you say that's right, or am I misinterpreting that?
I wouldn't say the extreme, because people think, again, to be trans, I need to change my body. I don't have to do anything in my body to be trans. Trans is in my brain, right? So if I have surgery or not, if I take hormones or not, that doesn't have anything to do. That's why it's incorrect to use the term transsexual. If someone is still using transsexual, it's because they didn't update their ideas. Gender and body, different things. If someone identifies transsexual, for example, you can respect them for wanting to use that. But the idea is that in transsexual, for example, people need to change their bodies in order to be trans, but that's not true anymore. We know that, you know, but just to say cross-dressing is not like an early stage of being trans, is that we didn't have language. We didn't develop the language yet at that point to understand. There's a very good show in Amazon called Transparent. Very good. So if you haven't seen, there's probably 3 or 4 seasons, very rich, very good, Transparent. And he talks a little bit about this. But I guess the point is, it's difficult for the population, because they put all together, like even like transvestite, right? It's the same idea of cross-dressing, right? It's someone who dressed up as one gender when they are not that gender, right? Nobody's talking about sex or the body, we're talking about gender. So that's why it's derogatory way, because it kind of put in like trans people are fake, you know, they're like not real women or not real men, right? Because the idea of the body and, you know, still attached to the identity. Yeah, I think that's would be my answer in the for now. Yeah.
Just to kind of hop off that idea of like correct terms and stuff. So you said earlier that, you know, like saying like the terms like biological woman and man, like that's has turned into kind of like a weaponized term, so we shouldn't use that. So I was just wondering, like, what is the correct term?
You can say sexual characteristic would be the most mainstream and correct to say sexual characteristic, because I am the one who advocates as well to not use sex as to describe the body, because we need to change the language if you want to change the understanding, because when I say sex, people think gender, right? And so that's the thing we need to separate. So yeah, definitely biological men or biological women or biological sex, it's not really correct. So yeah, you can say sexual characteristic or just say body/genitals, because we're talking about the body and that needs to be separated from gender.
That makes sense.
And Pri, if I could hop in, this is Claire over here,
Please.
a little bit more to Paul's question, because it's such an important question. And I think one of the biggest shifts that occurs generationally is that we get new terminology, just like Pri named early on. When we have language and when we can name something, it brings that thing to life. It gives it a space to exist. Otherwise, it's in an invisible place. And so what's happening now with younger generations, and I'm the same age as Pri, we're sort of an in-between, Xennial is our generation between Gen X and Millennial. But as we see these younger generations come of age, the advantage they have over any of the generations of us gathered here is more language, more terminology, more education, and more resources, especially at a younger age. And you'll start seeing now there's books that are geared towards young children under the age of 10 that are starting this conversation or introducing these concepts, not so much to say one way is better or not better, but to expose young children early on to the rainbow of possibilities. And so with that exposure comes a lot more accessibility to one's own essence, you could say, one's own expression, choices coming online earlier. And therefore, those young ones and all of us ultimately are able to move from the invisible realms into a more visible place. And even for those of us who don't identify as LGBTQIA+, I actually don't identify it with any of the letters, and yet I'm Pri's partner in this work. It's still important. It gives us accessibility, or it gives us an access and a visibility to the conversation to broaden or widen our aperture. So that's a big piece of the difference that I see. And then for us older generations to continue educating ourselves, and then to also, what can you say, relax the rigidity that we all grew up in order to receive the experiences of other people, specifically younger people. So those are a few of my thoughts on how to approach it.
Thank you, Claire.
This is Felicia. I just want to jump in really quickly. For those of you who don't know, Lori Frugoli, I believe, unless I have it wrong, that you are our district attorney here in Marin County. Thank you for joining us. And I see you also had a question about the slides. So I just wanted to clarify with you, Pri, if it's okay. Obviously, we'll have the video, but if it's okay to provide the slide deck or maybe some sort of abbreviated version, because I know this is also your professional material on the website after this presentation.
Exactly. I will share a shorter version of the slides. Yeah, and this is my work material. Yeah, it took me 10 years to get into this way of putting it together. Right in the beginning, it was not like this, but yeah, I'm glad that you're appreciating and wanting to go back and see. The recording also would help to go back and see. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question, Pri, if I might. I am absolutely fascinated, and I really appreciate your sharing this information with us. And what comes to mind is something that I've tried to learn over the years, which is not to label people. And to accept people for who they are and not any particular label. You are an incredible person. And so having to learn all these different labels, I mean, I use them, but I just wonder about that perspective. It's like, well, I want to focus on who you are and who each person is. So I would love a comment on that.
Right, that's an excellent question. I get that question very, very frequently in my thoughts, in my teachings all over, especially in corporations too. Here's the thing, let's see if I can put it that way. Because we see the world from those lenses, the only way, right, that we talked before. What happened is we create this term that people say, oh, we are all human, we are all equal. So what important is treat you with respect and nothing else matters. But that's not true. Because yes, we should be treated equally. We should be all women, all human beings. But you're not yet, because if you have a gender that put you behind in the running, or the it was like a competition of life, let's say, some people are not starting from the same start point than a lot of other people are because of their color, because of their gender. And if you're transgender, you're starting right there. So especially if it's a run and they say, okay, go, like you're starting from here and I'm starting from here. Who's gonna get there first, right? So that's why we need to label everything. Yes, the idea of not putting labels comes from the wrong understanding of whiteness and cis heteropatriarchy. That's what's going on. And people would say that every day to me. And I said, you think that way because you need to change the perspective. You need to change. I have a cube here. You need to change the face you see in reality. If it's a cube you see from this face and this one too, and this one too, not just from one perspective. So that's why Claire also said, if you don't have the language right now, those things will not exist. So if we just say everybody is human and everybody's equal, we are gonna miss the point because we're gonna be bypassing the process of recognizing some people are not in the same position that I am. So that's why I need to name that, because if I don't name, I will not notice, right? So that's a little bit of that.
So it's a deeper acknowledgement of how each person presents themselves. Is that accurate?
Yes, Joanne. If I would say, if you can to take something with you from here, if you can as exercise presenting yourself as a white woman, for example, or as a cisgender woman, I don't know if you identify as hetero or what's your sex orientation, in your gender pronouns, she and her, that is going to be a huge change. Why? Because white people don't know they're white, cisgender people don't know they're cis, you know? That's the problem. And that's why we think that way. So that's bringing that knowledge also is very elegant. You know, it's the most elegant thing you can do today is to say, I'm white and cisgender. You know, that's going to be, whoa. Someone's going to say, you understood, you understand what we're talking about. So that's what I can give you for now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else? Kay Bertucci?
Yeah, last question.
Did she raise her hand? No. Okay.
Or Lori, did you have one?
Oh, I did. Thank you so much, Pri. I wanted to know if you offer this training for law enforcement and first responders. I deal a lot with them, and sometimes, honestly, they want to ask somebody the right thing. Like sometimes we struggle with how do you identify? It's so difficult, especially your point with youth and struggling and not even feeling comfortable going to a bathroom. Do you offer training, some type of a training for law enforcement and first responders? And then I appreciate your acknowledging that these terms have kind of changed and morphed, because I do find it difficult sometimes to catch up with it. And I so much appreciate you kind of distilling it to and acknowledging that too. So
thank you for that. Yeah, I that's why I'm doing this work, that I realized when I gained the language, I was like, oh my God, now I know who I am. Now I can help other people who don't know who they are and where they are, right, in this spectrum of life. So and the term knowledge is, yes, this is new, that like there's more organizations and more people talking about and putting out there. Like, it will say in the past 10 years for sure, but the past 5 years has increased dramatically. So I would definitely be happy to support you in doing trainings for whoever you need. I partner also with Claire sometimes, and also with Fresh, who is a trans man in the Bay Area, who's he co-teaches with me a lot of the work. And yeah, and also bringing the UN, like we having this conversation internationally at UN, so people will understand that it's going to change for everybody. It's going to take a while, but it's going to change for everybody in a few years. Yeah.
Great.
So feel free to get my contact with Felicia or anything. Yeah. Thank you.
Next question, Felicia said.
Okay, so I guess if there's any really super burning questions, we'll give you this last little window if anybody has one.
Hinaguchi had that chat question.
Oh, was there a chat question here? Nameling / labeling in this instance is an honoring / acknowledging instead of a compartmentalizing / minimizing. Great. Oh, that was from Clara's statement.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So
it's okay to ask the pronouns. Someone asked, yes, you definitely ask people if you don't know their gender or their pronouns, like what's your pronoun? What's your gender gender pronoun? That's the best way you can talk to trans people. Like, how do you identify? You can ask the question. You're never gonna offend a trans person if you ask, how do you identify and what's your gender pronouns? Questions that you should not ask is like, have you done surgery? Like, what you have down there? Like, you don't ask those kind of things to no one, right? So you're not gonna ask a trans person that too. So just a heads up for those kind of questions. But yeah, you definitely can ask those.
I noticed that Rick has his hand up.
yeah, Rick, did you have a quick question?
Just a comment that most of the languages of Europe have gender pronouns, and in fact, of an exception that our nouns are not genderized, but the Romance, Germanic, and Slavic languages all genderize nouns too. On the other hand, my husband is an Eskimo. They don't have pronouns in their language, and that's true also of Hawaiian and Japanese, and I think a lot of other Asian languages. So if you're going to ask about people's pronouns, probably it would apply to Europeans, not so much to Asians.
Great. Thanks, Rick, for that additional point there. So thanks again, Pri, for all that great in-depth information. And I just want to highlight the uncomfortability and appreciate everybody who attended today and being willing to sit in the challenge of the discomfort. I've kind of conventionally myself been more of an environmentalist over my lifetime, and slowly coming more towards the social justice community. I've noticed that it goes from we're all in this together, standing shoulder to shoulder, we're going to save the environment, to oh my gosh, we have to look at each other across the table and it's really tense. It's challenging. So I just want to wrap up the conversation here. So as we mentioned at the beginning, at sdgmarin.org, we'll be posting this video, although we might also post it on unamarin.org. I have to kind of look at that. We're doing a little bit of website redos. So let's see, I have a short list of things to mention. We are the United Nations Association Marin County chapter. So if you did not get this event announcement emailed to you ahead of time, you can sign up for our newsletter that goes out whenever we have upcoming events. And again, unamarin.org. And this is SDG number 5, Gender Equality, part of a series we do every other month these days on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You can join the United Nations Association of the United States of America. So that's what we are as UNA Marin. We're a chapter. There's a network of over 200 chapters across the United States, and we are one of them. It's $50 a year. If you're 25 or younger, it's free. And let's see, also, you're welcome to join us, the local board of the UNA USA. So I'm one of the board members, Skip and Bonnie, Joni, Paul, there's, let's see, Bryson. I know we might have one or two other board members here that I'm forgetting to mention, but thanks board members for joining us. It's a great way for, civic engagement. If you want to kind of stretch your leadership skills, build your leadership skills, build some professional skills. I can show you how to update our WordPress website. I would love some help. And we will be emailing out the recording of this event to those of you who registered for it. And our next event is tentatively scheduled for July 10th, which will be on SDG number 6, clean water and sanitation. If anyone happens to have any insider information about clean water and sanitation and you want to contribute to that event, it would be great to hear from you. And I think finally, if anyone, let's see, Pri, do you have a few minutes to stick around in case anyone has any last minute follow-up questions after we officially end the event?
Yes, absolutely. Just want to say thank you for everyone for having me here today. It was a pleasure.
Great. Super. So please stay on the line if you have additional questions for Pri. We will officially close the event here. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Stay safe, everyone.